I'm lucky right now, baby's sleeping, so nap time is why I scheduled it at this time. Again, thank you all for showing up. I really do appreciate it. This will be recorded so that it can be shared afterwards for those who do come later, as well as for those who could not be here or any of people that you know and would benefit from this information. So to not lose too much time, I'd like to begin. As you all know, my name is Chris Lake. I am the founder of Community for a Cause. I have been advocating for lead poisoning for the last 8 years in New York City. And I would like to start by giving thanks to the World Health Organization. Special thanks to Dr. Marian Yera, of WHO. I'd like to thank Dr. Ruth Etzel, former head of EPA's Office of Children's Health Protection. I'd like to thank Omid Miri for being here. Thank you, doctor. I'd like to thank Kirsty Stansfield, as well as Dr. Tamus Kuyate, whose research, those 3 researchers I just mentioned, are the basis of why we are all here today. In addition, I'd like to thank Sherry Whitelock Bollington of Jamaica's Caribbean Poison Information Network, who has been a collaborator with myself on getting this information out there, on pushing for research on this plant-based compound that we're here to talk about today. So the first topic to discuss is the size of our problem. Welcome, welcome, welcome those who are joining us now. We're just getting into the size of the problem. And the number that I really want in your head is 800 million. Right now, sadly, across the globe, 800 million children have been affected by lead exposure and lead poisoning. To give you context, that means 40% of all the kids on the planet have been affected by this. As we are well aware, lead poisoning causes brain damage, it's considered irreversible, and it wreaks havoc on the systems because it does nothing positive and has no nutritional value for the body. The body can do literally nothing with it. Stays in the blood for about 4 weeks, can move to the bones, the organs, about a month and a half there, and it can stay in the bones for up to 20 to 30 years, being released when someone breaks a bone, during pregnancy, and during breastfeeding, which makes it an environmental toxin that can literally be passed down from generation to generation. It truly is a scourge. In the US, we are most aware of lead because of Flint, Michigan. That put it on the national radar. And between January and April of 2015, most people who don't live in the area became aware of the situation. Before that, we thought the problem was eradicated in the 70s. If you're not an activist or an advocate or endocrinologist, you are not likely running into that much. But truth be told, across America, you will find over 3,800 neighborhoods. Welcome, welcome, welcome. There are over 3,800 neighborhoods right now that have childhood lead poisoning levels that dwarf that of Flint, Michigan. The reason why this doesn't get much more press is because there's not a finger we can point at the governor or any other legislators or policymakers for doing such. Right now, I live in Queens. I'm reporting to you from Queens, New York City. If I were to drive to Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and ask how the lead levels are for the Hasidic Jewish community children, you'll find that it's 3 times the level of Flint, Michigan, which on average, Flint was about 5 micrograms per deciliter. Moving forward, to avoid being too technical, I'll call it units. So they had 5 units of lead in their blood. And while in America, the rate's 1 in 38, and that might not seem that jarring to someone, that is greater than the rate of autism. And when you expand the globe, you'll find that it's actually 40%. In some places like Nepal, will have a rate of 66% of kids affected by lead poisoning. It's more serious than we may realize. So I've been advocating for lead poisoning for the last 8 years. As a special educator by trade, I've come across kids with lead poisoning every classroom I've worked in. The classrooms are meant for kids with autism, but I always come across these kids, and I get concerned when I see how much more challenging their time is, their pathway of learning is, compared to those who have autism. It led me to create my organization, to advocate, to push for legislation, and bring you here today, as well as do my research. In those 8 years, I found myself in many rooms with advocates, endocrinologists, scientists, researchers, legislators, and a word that consistently I find missing is treatment. And it concerns me because it's often considered a lost cause for those who already suffered brain damage from lead poisoning. The common understanding is that it's irreversible. That lends to a practice of, well, what can we do? And I always advise when you ask that question to rephrase it, or at least rephrase the stress from what can I do to, well, what can I do? And so we're here to discuss treatment. And the question we must ask is lead poisoning truly irreversible? Is it possible that new research, breakthrough research, is giving us hope? And I would like to argue it is. I would like to argue that it is reversible, and we're just scratching the surface of that. So that being said, we're going to go into Dr. Thomas Uyarte's research, who was the lead researcher on this particular study. But I do want to introduce the concept of this plant-based compound. Now, it's called 7,8-dehydroxyflavone, and I'm going to aim to be both technical and use plain language so everyone can understand. 7,8-dehydroxyflavone is basically a molecule. And let me share my screen. I think I'm already sharing the screen with you all. How lovely. And I want to show you something that looks a little bit like this. So here we go. Bear with me, my work laptop is a bit slow. Okay. 7,8-dehydroxyflavone. What is it? It is a molecule that's found inside a tropical daisy called the Tridex daisy. It's this lovely looking plant right here that grows in tropical and subtropical regions. It is considered a weed. It grows much like a shrub, as you see here. And the molecule that's derived from it is 7,8-dehydroxyflavone. And to give you an analogy, vitamin C, you don't see my shared screen. Okay, that's good to know. Does anyone else? Hold on, folks, sorry. Sure. Okay, can you guys see my screen now? Thumbs up. Okay, great. So. Working on this. Again, I apologize, my work computer is a little slow. All right, so this molecule, 7,8-dehydroxyflavone, is sourced from the Tridex daisy, this lovely looking flower. And it grows like a shrub. And to break down what the molecule is like, it's similar to vitamin C. Vitamin C is a molecule that can be derived from oranges. So 7,8-dehydroxyflavone, which I'll from here on call DHF. DHF is to this Tridex daisy as vitamin C is to oranges, or quercetin is to onions or apples. You have these different vitamins or molecules that have benefits inside. It's a naturally occurring base. Now, moving forward, let's take a look at the research. It's called, it's called 7,8-dehydroxyflavone rescues lead-induced impairment of vesicular release, a novel therapeutic approach for lead-intoxicated children. What they did in this study was take pregnant long-Evan rats, there they are, they fed them a diet of 1,500 parts per million lead acetate until they delivered the pups. After the pups were delivered, they continued to feed these pups 1,500 parts per million of lead acetate until about day 35. After postnatal day 35, they began to administer DHF via injection for 15 days. After 15 days, they saw a rescue of the brain function that was damaged by lead. They saw a reverse of the cognitive deficits. In the area of the Schaefer collateral, the doorway to the hippocampus, which is required for learning and memory to happen. Now, for those of you who are not well versed in neuroanatomy, I'm going to give a simple biology lesson in terms of the anatomy of learning. We are given in our brain these lovely cells called neurons, and they have two ends. And this spiky end right here, these are the dendrites. And this part, these called axons or axon terminal buttons, okay? And messages move through our brain via these neurons. And how we learn is essentially that we receive information from an experience or a sensory input. For example, if I touch a kettle that's hot in the stove, I learn that is hot, that is bad, do not touch the kettle. If someone tells me 2 + 2 is 4, I am going to store that and I have this fact in my head. And how it essentially works in plain English is that the information moves through a chain of neurons that communicate by spreading the message along until it reaches the hippocampus. Now, as I said, there is a Axon, dendrite, which is the beginning point, the beginning pole of the neuron, and a axon or axon terminal buttons, which is the end point. You can think of the dendrites as the ear, which hears the message, and the dendrites as the ear, and the axon as the mouth, similar to what you see on the screen here. I'm putting just one ear and one mouth, but it's realistically more along the lines of this. Multiple points where the information can be received by the neuron and multiple points where a message can be sent by the neuron. And it follows that chain to this part of the brain called the hippocampus. The hippocampus is like the Amazon warehouse for your long-term memory, okay? It's a storage house. Once you've given the hippocampus information strong enough, it will be stored there for approximately 2 weeks before it moves to various parts of the brain, depending on what kind of memory it is. All your memories are not stored in one place in the brain. Certain parts of your brain hold on to procedural memory, which would be used for riding a bicycle or playing a musical instrument, something that is going to be a hands of body movement type memory. Other memories like facts will be stored in one place. Other memories like experiences will be stored in another place. Other memories like emotions will be stored in different places, like the amygdala for memories and neocortex, temporal lobes for other places. That being said, you're going to see a chain, right? We're going to move the information across the neural chain or the neural network until it reaches that hippocampus. In a study that Thomas Guyate and his team looked at, the doorway of the hippocampus is called the shaper collaterals, and that's where they saw the damage reversed. Again, the function of that part of the brain was restored. It's never been seen before when it comes to lead poisoning, which is why the study says it's a potential novel therapeutic. Now, that aside, I want you to think about BDNF, okay? And this is a critical element inside your brain that acts kind of like fuel for the learning process, okay? Without BDNF, that information is not going to move across that chain to the hippocampus, okay? We need that fuel. And I'm really simplifying it here, and I'll break down the more complex in a bit. But what BDNF essentially does is it tells each link in the chain after receiving the message, hey, I really like that message. Please send me more messages just like that. And physically speaking, the links in the chain move closer and closer together. And as they move closer and closer together, it's easier for the information to be passed because the chemical component, they're called neurotransmitters, have less space to move. There's also more receptor sites available for these neurotransmitters, which allows for even greater strength of the message. You want a strong message to really make your brain really efficient. So BDNF fuels that movement through the communication chain, and it also makes the brain more efficient by producing certain effects. So let's go into that. The fuel, so here we have a complex picture that I'll try and simplify very much. This is what's happening in your brain when BDNF is present. I need to move this top guy though. So looking at the top, you see BDNF, and it's landing in this little slot right here. These guys are called Trek B. And then you see 4 little guys over here, you see 4 little guys over here, and then situations happen. Now, to make that a little easier to digest, because I don't think everyone needs to know what a kinase cascade is and what calmodulin K is, let's look back at that fuel example, okay? Think of BDNF as your debit card. The debit card is going to enter this slot. Okay, that slot is what I said was Trek B. Okay, when BDNF lands in that receptor site, then it allows your PIN number, 4 digits, to be put in. When those 4 digits are able to be put in, there's a chain reaction that allows you to have access to fuel, the fuel that is going to move the communication that allows to memory and learning. And here we see 3 different types of fuel. Just like there's 3 different types of fuel, in a chain reaction, there's 3 net effects. One of those effects are neuroplasticity, one of those effects are neural growth, and another effect is protective. It helps make sure it strengthens the cell so that it doesn't burst and go through a process of apoptosis. Okay, so quick review before I move on to what lead does. Anatomy of the brain, we have a chain of neurons, it leads to the hippocampus. BDNF is the fuel that helps make this possible, strengthens the connections, helps them grow closer together so they're more efficient. Does this make sense to everyone so far? Yes, no, maybe so? All right, I'm seeing thumbs up, beautiful. Great, 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 great. Okay, so thank you for that. Now the question is, well, what happens with lead? What does lead do? I'm going to take it off screen share for a second. Let's see some chats. Adana, how you doing? Stop share. Okay. So when lead gets in the brain, it makes a big mess of everything because it acts like a mimic. And I'm not going to go into the depths of the atomic structure of lead, but it simply looks a lot to the body like a couple of different components. And that system I told you about, the chain and BDNF and the hippocampus, they all rely on a couple elements. In particular, they rely on calcium, iron, zinc, and magnesium for the neurotransmitters, those chemicals that are moving from link in the chain to link in the chain, to be able to pass the information along. What lead looks like to the body is, unfortunately, calcium, iron, and zinc. Thankfully not magnesium, but it does enough damage with those three. And since it looks like this to the body, it is able to deposit itself in places where only those should be. This is where the damage happens. So it prevents messages from being able to be sent. It prevents that mouth from speaking the message to the ear. It also prevents the ear from being able to grow closer to the mouth. Again, the axon to dendrite messaging. And unfortunately, it also does something quirky where it creates misfires. So it's almost as if there's ghost communication. So some neurons will fire despite the fact no message has actually been sent. And this may present a number of strange behaviors, perhaps OCD, perhaps, excuse me, not OCD, but compulsive behaviors, impulsive behaviors that we see in those who are afflicted with lead poisoning. So what is the solution? 7,8-DHF, right? So what does DHF do? DHF is clever in that it looks like BDNF. And I glazed over what that stands for. It's brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Since DHF mimics this, it's able to hack the brain's damage by convincing the brain everything's okay. You can still operate the way you should, despite the presence of lead, okay? So I'm gonna take a look at my slides. That in a second. When DHF goes in, it allows the axon to release calcium, it allows the axon to release BDNF, it allows the receptor, the dendrites, to grow bigger, it allows the dendrites to have those three net effects we talked about: cell protection, neuroplasticity, and neural growth, despite the presence of lead. The brain is able to function as it did before. This does not remove lead. Understand, oftentimes in the treatment conversation, what's stressed is removing lead or chelating lead. And in America, if someone doesn't have 45 units of lead in their blood, we do not offer chelation as an option because it's actually dangerous. There's side effects that we can't allow ethically. Under that, we can only offer such molecules or vitamins like vitamin C, calcium, and iron to prevent further absorption. However, neither of these treatments in any way help the brain recover, but this compound does. And that gives me hope. And I invite everyone who's watching to have some hope that there is a potential novel treatment to give people their brains back, to give children the opportunity to learn again, to have a more full life through a completely natural process. So and what's interesting, at least to me, you might find it interesting too, odds are you will, because you're here with me. So you got some skin in the game. Let me put it back on screen share. Share. Okay. Now, when we look at 7,8-DHF, sorry guys, you'll find that it doesn't just help with rescuing brain damage from lead poisoning. It also helps in deficits found with symptoms from Alzheimer's, symptoms from Rett syndrome, symptoms from Parkinson's, symptoms from Huntington's disease, symptoms from plain old injury of the brain, the hippocampus, symptoms of epilepsy, symptoms of HIV-associated neurocognitive disorder, symptoms of antidepressant. Well, this is actually a synthetic version, but it exhibited a potent antidepressant effect. And just to discuss the depression aspect as well, PTSD, there's another one that we're seeing very positive results from this molecule. It's rescuing the brain from the damage. But to discuss depression very quickly, this study right here, 7,8-dehydroxyflavone, or tropomyosin kinase related receptor B agonist, yada, yada, yada. It has a fast onset antidepressant-like effect in rats exposed to chronic mild stress. And what I want to stress is the fast onset. So this study also used DHF, okay? It was also injected, and it also found within 3 to 4 weeks, a significant change. And I want to stress the fact that what's great about this compound, that has the ability to really rescue the brain within a month's time. And that's why it's so worth talking about, researching, and finding more pathways towards human trials and supplement use for children and adults who are suffering from this. All right. So back to here. Okay, that being said, there is a minor problem, okay? And that minor problem is that in America, the Food and Drug Administration, FDA, is a gatekeeper for drugs. And as a result, they have a very strict definition of what can be a drug and what cannot be a drug. And if something is plant-based, it cannot be a drug in this country, even if it's good for you. In fact, not only can it not be a drug, it cannot be labeled as intended for prevention, treatment, or curing any disease. And to give you an example, if you look at any vitamins, this is B12, B2. We all know B2 is good for you. You'll find a little statement that says this statements have not been evaluated by the FDA, not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, prevent any disease. My wife had a baby 2 years ago. Most pregnant women are recommended to take multi-V prenatals. The OBGYN will recommend this supplement, but it is not FDA approved, and they cannot say it's intended to treat or mitigate symptoms of any ailment. So that might give some people pause on, well, is there skin in the game? Is it worth it to research this and offer an opportunity if it's not even going to be able to be administered as a drug? And the way I look at it is same way we look at vitamin C, the same way we look at iron, the same way we look at calcium. It is potential to be in that supplement category, in that nutraceutical category, in that prenatal vitamin category that can be recommended by doctors without being a violation. We can recommend DHF to families, to people who need this as a potential, without saying it's treating or preventing or curing, but it can be recommended as a course to aid with what other let's say treatments if they're getting vitamin treatment or chelation, but as a supplement that can be offered to help. That being said, I end here with a call to action, and it's quite simply this. Everyone in here knows one of 3 people, and I ask everyone who's watching this, both in this Zoom room and those who are watching the video recording of this, to send an email. After you finish this, send an email in the next 5 minutes to one of 3 people. One person leads a research team. If you know someone who leads a research team and this has been inspiring in any way to you, please reach out to them and ask, hey, I just heard this discussion on the World Health Organization's International Lead Poisoning Prevention Week platform about a molecule that rescues the brain. Can we look into this? Can you look into this? I am curious. It seems like it also helps in arraignment of other brain damage issues. Second person you may know, someone who can fund research. Email them, reach out and say, hey, I just heard this man discuss about a plant-based compound that can reverse brain damage, and there's a lot of research behind it across a number of different symptoms. Can we look into funding this? And number 3, the third person is someone you may know who knows one of those 2 people if you don't. Reach out. Reach out because we need more research. We do need human trials. Dr. Thomas Guyarte is working right now on a grant to the NIH that has a slow track. He'll be able to start the earliest December 2023. And in the meanwhile, there's 800 million children who are still waiting for some treatment. We're still waiting for some hope. And I hope that we can give some hope to them soon. I thank you all for joining very much. Reach out if you have any questions. You all have my email, and enjoy your weekend. Question. If you have questions, you can unmute yourself. Let me make that happen.
Chris, this is Maury. I do have
1 second, Dr. Moore, I can't quite hear you.
Can you hear me now? Tell me when. I'll count until you
Okay.
can tell me if you can hear me. 1, 2,
Okay, I can hear you
3.
now. Start over, please.
Great. So I wanted to modify one of your comments. So the FDA is precluded by law in terms of not just plant-derived molecules, but anything that hasn't been investigated in a particularly rigorous way, as the FDA defines that.
Mhm.
So what you're really describing is a difference between how to bring a molecule, a treatment to market. And the FDA gives approval when a company has gone through the process of the biochemical studies, the animal studies, the human studies, indicating both efficacy and identifying what the potential risks are. And if the risk-benefit ratio is favorable, then it comes to market. The problem in our country in terms of the chelation approach to getting lead out of the body and hoping the body can recover, if not in the brain, but certainly in other parts, is that we haven't had a new chelating agent developed in over 30 years.
Right.
That's in the US, and the drugs that we have don't work under 45. If we had a chelator that worked at 1, that was safe, I would use it at 1. So to me, the issue of bringing it from the laboratory where the studies are done in mice to humans is that we don't know the downside of this molecule. It's not BDNF, and we're not even testing BDNF in the same way that the flavonoid is. So that's the piece that's missing for me. I'm with you. We need something that's effective
Right.
more than what we have in any
Right.
way, whether it's
Right.
getting lead out or bypassing the effect of the lead. But this market, I mean, this particular molecule, I don't think we have enough information to go forward with treating kids for sure, and maybe not even adults. It's also almost all the studies were done in rodents, and not everything is translatable directly from that particular species, group of species, to humans.
Right.
And that's a second issue for it. So just caution.
That's fair. I appreciate that. And if I can connect you with Dr. Thomas Duarte, I'd love to. 2 things I did miss that I left out is he's reported that there's no signs of toxicity from this plant, and there have been no negative effects found yet across studies. That's not to say there are none, but across the studies that have been done, they have not yet found adverse reactions or any form of toxicity. But again, this study is from 2018. The majority, bulk of the work that I've seen on this have been in the last 4 years, so there may need to be a greater depth of research before everyone can feel comfortable. But I do just want to put that out there. And as a side note, he did have a parent reach out to him after doing his research, and they said on their own volition, he did not recommend they do this. On their own volition, they found this product, they gave it to their child who had lead poisoning, and they saw dramatic results. And that's like anecdotal, obviously. That's not a very scientific example. However, it does provide a sense that there may be hope. There may be hope. Susan, I see you have a question.
I would like to make a comment. I'd like a little synopsis of what your product is, but I represent adults who are lead poisoned, and I was one. So I do know what works and what doesn't and what it feels like from the inside out. But we do have a product in FDA trials that is a new chelator, and it works. It does not, the problem with chelators is that they attach and then they drop midway. And so you become reinfected with your own metal. And so it is dangerous because you're constantly sick, and it's a horrific life doing that. But Amerimed by Dr. Boyd Haley created this. We've had it in FDA trials, I think 6 or 8 years now. It's not coming out of FDA trials, I can tell you that, because it does too many things that there are medications for, and it's not going to get past Big Pharma. They'd like to buy it from us and shelve it, and we're not in it for that game. We're in it so that people get well. And so nobody who's invested in it cares about the money. They care about people getting well. So it's in trials as a mercury chelator. It does have an affinity for mercury. It'll take mercury out of the body first, but then it goes to lead second, and then to the other metals. It won't take essentials out of your body. And the beauty of this product is that it will attach, it'll never drop. The metal becomes inert immediately, and it exits through the colon, not through the kidneys. So you don't have all of the other problem. It crosses the brain blood barrier. So because we'll never see the end of the FDA, the hoops keep getting higher and higher. It was on the market for years, and we know it works. We know there are 0 side effects. And I know, because I took it, I was more than willing to die. I can tell you that for sure. I was asking to die. And in 2 weeks, I was cleaning closets. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? But it really does work. So I've been at it a long time. People don't get sick. People do get better. It's Alzheimer's. It's the same thing your product is attempting to do too. So I don't think we have, the only possible remedy, but in the sick adults I know, they're it's like kids, but they manifest a little bit differently. So we're going to go to South America, and we are in South America going through their FDA equivalent. And so if it becomes available, it's something you should think about getting here from Mexico. Any Central or South American country will have access to it, and we will all have very inexpensive access to it.
Please keep me updated. It's good to know there's potential out there to also remove the lead that's safe and that has been studied and has research behind it. Please keep me updated on that. I would definitely like to know more about that. And just an addition for those who are listening, DHF is, as I told you, a Grossman plant. It's very cheap to make, which means it's very scalable across the globe. The FDA issue, as Dr. Maury Markowitz made the point, they have to have the precautions. They have to have the proper amount of research. And they also have to ensure that manufacturing is going to be uniform. That's part of the issue with plants. They can't guarantee the uniformity of giving a plant grown here versus there, grown in this farm versus that farm. Too many confounding variables, too many unknowns. But it is extraordinarily cheap, which gives me hope because it has the ability to scale up and provide a lot of help for people in the future. Susan, thank you. I really appreciate that. Appreciate it sharing. Dr. Maury, thank you as well. Thank you very much.
Can I tell you real quickly, if you have somebody very ill right now, there are some, I know everybody's really ill who's touched by it, but there are a couple of trials right now where we can get medicine for people. And honestly, I don't recommend healthcare for people, but I'm telling you, people get well. So you're welcome to contact me for that. Somebody's asking me to send information on the drug, and I will send this. The product is called NBMI, NB as in boy, MI. It's also been called OSR. It's been called a few things because FDA and other countries make us change the names for whatever reason. So it's Biomeromed, EMERAMED, and the creator is Dr. Boyd Haley. It's been around for 30 years, and I don't want to burst bubbles, but the FDA, I'm sorry, I just think they're criminals. I think
everyone has a fair share of issues with number of different policy holders, but yeah. We'll have to leave it there for now. I do want to leave room for anyone else who'd like to speak. I have Omid Miri, who actually was one of the researchers on the study. Is there anything you'd like to add? It's good to see your face.
Hey, Chris, very nice talk. I did many of the experiments in the original Gayarte paper on brains from rats and witnessed the reversal of impairments and release of neurotransmitters. So just to see the prospects that it could be translational gives me a lot of hope. And I commend you for how far you've taken the work, and just keep going, and excellent.
Thanks, brother, appreciate you. Let's see. I see Joseph, you asked, thank you for organizing. I will share a copy of the presentation with all of you. I'll send you all a recording and you can share it as you will. I do have to leave with a disclaimer. The information from this discussion is meant for educational purposes only and not intended to treat, prevent, or cure any symptoms or ailments. just like prenatal vitamins. Again, I thank everyone for joining. I wish you well. Please stay in contact. Let's find ways to move forward because 800 million children is way too much. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.